Yeah, I'm Gillies Chrichton. I've worked within the aviation industry for about 26 years now. First of all in the airport fire service, which I spent 17 years in the fire service and 7 years as a senior officer. Also spent about 10 years within the retained fire service as well, so a lot of background basically in aviation firefighting, but standard firefighting as well. So over the piece, as well as being in the fire service, I've also spent quite a lot of time managing risk, business continuity, a lot to do with emergency planning as well, mainly at airports, and also safety, fire safety and environment as well. So fair broad spectrum. I've got a Masters in Risk, Crisis and Disaster Management as well through Leicester University, so a lot of background towards the risk business continuity field.
What do you mean by business continuity?
Well, business continuity basically is a holistic look at being able to make sure that if your business suffers from some form of disaster or crisis situation, that you're going to be able to recover the business in as short a time scale as possible. It's really up to you how quickly you want to bring your business back up and running, so you can gold plate everything, so you've got something sitting on the shelf, or you can decide that you may be able to live with a short closure of your business. But business continuity is basically all around about it's a system of being able to identify what your risks actually are, what you can live with, what you can't live, making sure you've got your systems all covered off, you've looked at all your processes, you've looked at all your procedures, and that you actually know that if you lose a part of that, that you can bring it back online. One thing it's not, and that is a case of just relying purely on your insurance or your insurers to cover that. That's not what business continuity is all about. Business continuity, as I say, is all about a system within a business to really identify what could go wrong, how it could go wrong, and what you're actually going to do about that going wrong, and to be able to bring it back up and running within your business as quickly as possible. Again, it depends on the business, but it's really, really important that businesses should have a business continuity strategy. I've developed a strategy or a methodology for strategy and try to simplify it, and I call it my 7 R's. So it's a cyclical system based on first R being risk. So what can go wrong, how can it go wrong, what risk management, what procedures do I need to put in place. So identifying first of all what your risk is. Then the second R is around about resilience. So what plans do I need to put in place, having identified what the risk actually is for my business? What plans do I need to put in place? I try to make sure that I've got flexible plans, so one plan can actually cover look and cause and effect. It could cover a number of different areas, so you don't need to have 100 different plans. One plan may actually be able to do that. The third R is response. So in terms of response, do you rely purely on the emergency services, the police, the ambulance, the fire service, or within your business do you actually have a recovery team, or do you have a crisis management team? Do you have an emergency team? Businesses differ. In my background in the aviation sector, then airports have airport fire service, they've got duty first aiders, they've got people like that. So that all forms part of your response as well. The next R is resilience. So in terms of what I try to see is it's around about bounce back ability. How quickly can you bounce back after the disaster or the crisis has actually struck. So that's up to you to ensure that you do things like your business impact analysis to enable you to understand what resilience would look like in your business. The next R is rehearse. So it's really important that you don't purely go on that we may be able to do it, we may not, but you need to make sure that the plans that you've put in place, that you've rehearsed them so that on the day something going wrong, everybody can muck in, basically. The next R is reputation. I've missed one out, actually. Risk, response, resilience, rehearse, review. Right, so I'll just keep talking. So rehearse. It's really important that you rehearse what it is that you've got, what your plans actually are, so that on the day, every single person who's got a part to play within that actually know what they've got to do to bring the business back up and running again. The sixth R is review. So once again, you have had your incident. At the end of the incident, you really need to review, have your plans worked? Do I need to make any changes? And just in general, to be able to identify what went well, what didn't go so well, because it's really important that you capture the learning from the things that went well, in addition to the things that didn't go so well that you need to do something about. The seventh and final R is one of the most important, and that's reputation. It's really, really important that you manage your reputation. Now, you can only manage your reputation by getting it right on the day. And you can only get it right on the day if you've completed the other 6 R's. So you've identified what your risk is, you've identified what plans you need to put in place, you've gone through training, rehearsals, you've reviewed your plans to make sure that they're actually fit for purpose. If you do all that, then you are going to be able to protect your reputation at the end of the day. So that's my methodology for setting a business continuity strategy in. Cause and effect is a methodology whereby a single cause may lead to several effects. So if I have an electrical problem on a runway at an airport, so electrical failure, it can lead to disruption in the terminal building, it can lead to disruption on the runway. So it's not just looking at it in isolation. The beauty of that is you can actually use cause and effect. If you've got a single cause leading to multiple effects, then you write the plan based on the cause, and you can identify in your plan it will cover these 5, 6, 7, 10 different areas. Similarly, you could actually have multiple causes leading to a single effect. So again, you could look at a runway closure. The cause of that could be electrical failure, it could be snow, it could be ice, it could be fog, it could be 101 different areas or reasons why it's closed. But we really just need to write a plan on what do we do if the runway is closed. So cause and effect is a great way of being able to cut down on the number of plans that you have in place. You want to make sure that your plans are as effective as possible. If you've got 200, 300, 400 different plans because you've tried to plan for everything, then nobody's going to read all these plans. My mantra, one of my mantras is plan for anything, not everything. That way you make sure your plans are flexible enough to be able to deal with anything that you're going to be hit with. Well, again, it depends on very much on the business. However, there's certain key areas that you need to look at. So I've mentioned cause and effect. So having come from identifying what the risks actually are, the risks should then drive you to be able to say, what do I need to put in place? So purely looking at a risk assessment or your risk register, which you should have in place, you're looking at the likelihood of this happening. The business continuity plan is all about, forget the likelihood of this happening. This has happened. I now need to make sure that I deal with what that risk is. So you need to identify what your risk is and base your plans upon that particular risk. So cause and effect is really important. As I mentioned, the cause can lead to multiple effects, or multiple causes can lead to single effect. So identify what that is. You then need to identify who's being affected by this. So is it your customers? Is it your staff? Is it visitors? You need to be able to identify who is actually being affected by that. In doing so, you then need to identify what specific things do I need to put in place. So is it communications? How do I communicate with my customers? How do I communicate with my staff? Now, they can be one and the same thing, or they can be entirely different, but you need to identify what that is. You then need to take either your multiple causes or your multiple effects and then start to break that down. What do I do to be able to cover these things off? Do I need to have something sitting on a shelf somewhere, or is it something that I can share with another company, another organisation who's likewise minded? It's really difficult. Again, if you look in the aviation sector, it's really difficult to be able to have a spare runway sitting somewhere, or a spare terminal building. So you need to be able to identify within these plans, what is your recovery time objective? How quickly am I looking to have my building back up and running, or my runway, or my vehicles, or whatever it is that you've identified within your risk? So you have the ability then to be able to identify what's your recovery time objective. How quickly do I want to recover? And in doing so, it may very well be that I'm only going to establish 50% or 70%, but it's what can I do to start to bring my business back up to running in business as usual in the shortest time scale possible. So that's the type of areas that you would look at actually having within your plans. Well, as I mentioned, the 7 R's, which is the methodology that I've used. But again, that's not a be-all to end-all. There's a lot of good strategies out there. There's, many ways of being able to develop a strategy. But again, for me, it's really, really important that you get these key issues in there. You get your risk and business continuity go absolutely hand in hand. It's also really important that you have a business continuity policy. So what is it? Why do I need to take business continuity into consideration for my business? It's absolutely key for your business. Statistics show that companies who have not taken that into consideration, who don't have a robust strategy, who don't have business continuity or emergency or contingency plans in place, if you don't have that, then statistics show that within the following 12 months, after some form of disaster or crisis situation, 50% go out of business within the following 12 months. And then potentially within the following 3 years, that could be as high as 80% of businesses. So it's in everybody's best interest that you have a very robust strategy. The strategy is the one thing that will be able to drive you and drive your business and drive your board to make sure that you've put the proper things in place. And that's really key, that you get buy-in from a board level as well. This can't just be done by somebody on the shop floor. This is really something that's key, that the chief executive or your managing director, your top management really need to buy into business continuity, because it's in their best interest as well. Yeah, I think the kind of key area why do I bother with business continuity? It's quite clear that the insurance companies, they're not going to bail you out. Yes, you can look at business disruption policies, but if you look at it in terms of an iceberg, in terms of the percentage above the water to the percentage below the water, they'll cover you for the part above the water for business disruption, but it can cost thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds to be able to deal with the part below the water. There's also the potential that if you've got somebody in the same line of business as you, a competitor just down the road from you, that you're then going to lose all your business to your competitor. Nobody wants that. You're in business to do business, so it's really, really important to make sure that you take cognisis of business continuity management. As I say, these are the uninsurable parts. You can't be insured for that.
Sure. If you had to give a tip or advice, what would it be?
The one key piece of advice, or the one key tip that I would say is, and it's one of my mantras, I would give the piece of advice that every single day for, say, 5 minutes a day, just stop and think to yourself, what would I do right now if such and such happened? So that could be whilst you're standing in the shower, or whilst you're having your breakfast, or sitting in your office. It really doesn't matter. Just take 5 minutes. What would I do right now if all the lights went out? What would I do right now if 50% of my staff phoned in sick? If you can't answer what I would do right now, you need to sit down and write a plan for that. So that's the best piece of advice that I would give anybody. Think what if, not if only. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory in terms of the benefits of business continuity. Is you are going to be the business that's going to be continuing in the event of any disaster, any crisis situation. You're going to come out the back end of it. In some cases, you're going to come out the back end of it stronger than when you went into the front end of it. But the key thing is you're going to minimise the amount of time that your business is closed, or that they're operating at 20% or 50% or whatever. You're going to become really stronger at the end of it. One of the key areas that I always look at in this kind of area is that business continuity is really not a lot different to the golden hour that we talk about, in terms of where in the medical fraternity, if you can get a patient from the scene of an incident and get them into a hospital within the first hour, i.e. the golden hour, then the patient stands a much better chance of survival. A business is no different to that. If you can stabilise the business within the first hour of a crisis situation or a disaster situation, then the business stands a much better chance of survivable at the back end of it. Best practice, there's loads of areas of best practice out there. The finance industry have, for a number of years now, they've always been generally seen as being the leaders in business continuity, crisis management. So there's a lot of areas of real good practice in there. But I really need to then go back to my own industry, the aviation industry, whereby for a great number of years now, there's been legislation in place for and to enable an airport to operate, then you have to abide by certain regulations and laws to enable you to operate. So we've been doing, in essence, emergency planning for a great number of years. So within the aviation industry, we've really focused on the emergency planning side of it. We've now taken that another step. The Civil Contingencies Act, coming into being in 2004, really started to put the emphasis away from emergency planning and putting it onto a more holistic emergency planning coupled with business continuity. So the whole essence of the business continuity, which is now in statute, means that airports as Category 2 responders, we work hand in hand with the responding emergency services. But we also look to make sure that we're not just making sure that we can put fires out, or you load somebody into an ambulance and at the end of that we're done and dusted, because that's in essence is the very short time scale of an incident in its entirety. It can take weeks, months and years to then recover a business back to normality at the back end of that. So it's really important that you start to focus on that. And I see that within the aviation industry, where we're no longer really only looking at emergency planning. We're taking into consideration emergency planning, contingency planning, so being able to deal with non-emergency situations, but they happen here and now, and taking that right through into the business recovery phase. And again, if you focus on that, when I mentioned earlier about doing your exercises, so you exercise right through that journey to the entire end, to your business continuity, your business recovery, then you're in a much better place. The aviation industry is much better at that now than we were several years ago, so there's loads of examples of good practice in there.